Let's start with a brief report on the macroeconomic overview of Bangladesh. Bangladesh, a small country, is yet the 44th largest economy in the world in nominal terms. According to IMF, Bangladesh's economy is the second fastest growing major economy of 2016, with a growth rate of 6.2% per annum. Bangladesh's nominal GDP was $221 billion in 2016. This puts it above regional peers like Vietnam and Sri Lanka. Bangladesh's economic growth is primarily led by the industrial sector, particularly the manufacturing sector, which is dependent on availability of stable power supply. With the steady increase in population and expansion of economic activities, the demand for electricity is increased, with peak demand increasing by 8 to 9% per annum. However, the energy deficit as percentage of the maximum generation in megawatt has varied between 24% in 2005 to 26% in 2016, with peak deficit at 40% around 2010. This growth, combined with the power sector deficit, is set to drive demand for fuels, create urgency for government to improve basic energy supply infrastructure, increase electrification rate, promote economic reforms and industrialization. Sustaining current strong growth rates could become increasingly difficult in the absence of structural reforms. According to Bangladesh Power Development Board, 76% of Bangladesh's population had access to electricity in financial year 2016-2017. According to World Bank estimates, the power consumption in Bangladesh was 310.4 kilowatt-hour per capita per year, a relatively low figure by global standards, positioning Bangladesh below other regional countries like India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. The reason for this low access and demand-supply mismatch can be attributed to single fuel dependency for power generation, i.e. natural gas, which has been depleting continuously. Bangladesh has one of the most gas-reliant power sector among other similar emerging markets. As you can see from the second pie chart of slide 4, up to 58% of domestic gas production is allocated for use in the power sector. Gas is the primary driver of socio-economic growth for Bangladesh. With an estimated reserve of 13.6 TCF and an average production of 2,700 MMSCFD against a demand of 3,400 MMCFD per year, the reserves are estimated to be exhausted by 2023 if no new gas fields are explored. It is expected that the power sector itself will require at least 2,000 MMCFD by 2030. The first pie chart in slide 4 shows the primary energy consumption in Bangladesh in 2014-15, from which you can see the dependency of gas for Bangladesh. Majority of the gas reserves are from the onshore production fields. The offshore fields remain largely unexplored. Bangladesh has reserves of 3,100 million ton of coal, with 13% in the proved category. Although high grade of coal is produced having high energy content and low sulfur, mining of coal fields are very difficult due to social and environmental challenges, which limits its production. Imported furnace oil is another source of energy for us. With a decline in the rate of production of natural gas, dependency on the use of imported furnace oil and diesel has increased for the generation of electricity. Government has also taken measures to import LNG, which has become a potential source for the industry for mitigating gas demand in the generation of electricity, as well as to supply for industry demands for manufacture of fertilizer. LPG is also being considered to be imported to cater for domestic needs. However, at current non-subsidized price of 1,400 taka per 12.5 kilo, LPG is a costly fuel compared to its alternatives of domestic gas and kerosene. Bangladesh has good potential for harnessing renewable energy sources such as solar, biomass, and wind. At present, total installed capacity from renewable energy is approximately 475 megawatt. Bangladesh presently has one hydropower plant at Kaptai with a generation capacity of 230 megawatt. Hydro accounts for 1% of overall generation capacity. The country also does not have nuclear power plants, but plans to have its first such plant at Rupur. Wind currently plays a minimal role in Bangladesh's renewable energy portfolio, accounting for 0.9 megawatt of generation capacity. From slide 8, it can be seen that the installed capacity and generation in 2017, based on the fuel type. I think the slides have gone. Shall we wait for it to come back?
Karishma, I want to tell you that you have 15 minutes.
I know.
You better if you can finish it.
Yeah. Bangladesh's energy sector is overseen by three key regulatory bodies: Ministry of Power, Energy and Mineral Resources, which holds overall responsibility for regulation and development of the energy sector; Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission, responsible for tariff setting; and Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, which oversees renewable energy projects. In terms of the power sector value chain, PGCB is responsible for the operation of transmission assets. 5 companies, as shown in the slides, are responsible for power distribution operation in various regions of Bangladesh. BPDB and REB are the power off-takers. The gas activities of Bangladesh are carried on by Petrobangla Group. The activities of Petrobangla Group encompasses the whole spectrum of oil, gas and mineral sector of the country. The companies under Petrobangla are involved in each of the stages from the drill pit to burner tips. Through its companies like BAPEX and GTCL, Petrobangla conducts exploration and distribution of gas. RPGCL has been entrusted by Petrobangla with the functions to manage, supervise and coordinate the use of CNG, LPG and LNG in Bangladesh. If we could move on to the... One of Petrobangla's major activities consists of organizing, supervising and administering the production sharing contracts it enters into with the international oil companies for the purpose of exploration and extraction of petroleum. Mining is also carried out by Petrobangla, and it is also entrusted to develop mineral resources in the country. Bangladesh Petroleum Corporation is entrusted with the responsibility of importation, storage, processing and sale of crude petroleum and other refined petroleum products. The key legislations in Bangladesh in terms of energy law compose of the Gas Act, the Electricity Act and the Bangladesh Petroleum Act. The procurement laws are the Public Procurement Act 2016, the Bangladesh Private Sector Infrastructure Guidelines and the Quick Enhancement of Electricity and Energy Supply Special Provisions Act 2010, which governs the procedure for procurement of private sector infrastructure projects. The Public Procurement Act requires goods, works or services which are procured by the government using public funds to be procured through a tendering process. On the other hand, the Quick Enhancement of Electricity and Energy Supply Act allow public procurement of unsolicited projects through negotiation with sponsors. The Quick Enhancement of Energy Act expressly stated its provisions to prevail over any provision of the Public Procurement Act. Since the application of Public Procurement Act has been excluded by the 2010 Act, the requirement of using public tendering would not apply to projects awarded under the 2010 Act. Most procurements in the private sector in the recent years has been under the Quick Enhancement of Electricity and Energy Supply Special Provisions Act. The Gas Act 2010 regulates the transmission, distribution, marketing, supply and storage of the natural gas and liquid hydrocarbon in Bangladesh. The licensing authority for this is the BERC. On the other hand, the Electricity Act regulates the transmission, supply and use of electrical energy. Under the Act, the government may grant a license to any person to supply electrical energy in any specified area and also to lay down electrical supply lines for the transmission of energy. Such license is also now issued by BERC. Bangladesh Petroleum Act 2016 sets out requirements in relation to the import, storage, transportation, production and refining of petroleum. The Petroleum Act, among other things, sets out different requirements for different classes of petroleum based on their flashpoint temperature. Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission Act set up the BERC with the mandate of regulating Bangladesh's electricity, gas and petroleum sectors. It is also responsible for setting the tariffs for electricity generation, supply and distribution. BERC is also responsible for the determination of the licensing conditions. Foreign Exchange Regulations Act 1947 is another important legislation that affects the implementation of large infrastructure projects in Bangladesh. The government of Bangladesh has set out key national policies to guide the energy sector. A reliable and sufficient energy supply will be key to power the economic progress. The government released the National Energy Policy in May 2004, followed by a power system master plan and gas sector master plan. Despite setting goals for infrastructure development and fuel mix diversification, there is insufficient action implementing. The goal of National Energy Policy was to bring entire country under electrification by 2020, ensure development of domestic natural resources, and optimal performance of energy utilities. The goals are not yet being met. The development of offshore gas fields and coal is being hindered by lack of know-how and inadequate support of foreign expertise. The Power System Master Plan of 2010 aimed to achieve universal electrification by 2021. It targeted quick expansion of installed generation capacity at 24,000 megawatt by 2021 and diversification away from the natural gas to coal. It proposed to have share of coal to account for 50% in generation by 2030, of which 30% was envisaged to come from local coal. It also aimed to achieve an efficiency gain of 20% by 2030. The 2016 iteration of the PSMP has lowered the demand forecast to 13,000 megawatt by 2020, significantly down from the PSMP 2010, and set the targeted power generation capacity by 2021 at 21,000 from 24,000 megawatt. It embodies a fuel mix of 35% contributions from coal, 35% from gas and LNG, and 30% from renewable source, power import, nuclear, and others. The report also envisaged lowering power demand by 12% through ensuring efficient consumption. The Renewable Energy Policy approved in 2008 set an objective for 5% of electricity to be generated from renewable sources by 2015 and 10% by 2020, with calls to develop smaller-scale solar, biogas, and biomass plants. Bangladesh has yet to formalize a national coal policy, despite repeated pledges by officials for its release and ongoing debate and discussion over the importance of increasing coal supply. Although the government estimates that the country has significant domestic coal resources of 3.5 billion metric tons, increasing domestic production is highly controversial. New mining projects would require relocation of villages and agricultural activities, which would create environmental and safety concerns. Such relocations always involve substantial investments. The private power sector power generation policy is also an important policy for this area. It provides details on the structure of private power projects in Bangladesh. According to the policy, IPPs are implemented on a build-own-operate basis with the solicitation processed by PowerCell. Successful bidders are required to make a minimum 20% equity investment and are awarded a letter of intent, which requires the bidder to enter into a PPA, fuel supply agreement, and other relevant documents. The power procured by the IPP is purchased by BPDB or REB. The government provides guarantees for PPAs in the form of implementation agreements, which guarantee the performance and payment obligations of government agencies, like the fuel supplier and lessor of land, as well as the power off-takers. In addition, the government commits to provide all necessary support in terms of obtaining permits and licenses. The policy also provides the tariff structure for the sale of electricity, which primarily consists of a capacity payment and an energy payment. A mechanism is also provided for the adjustment of certain tariff components to reflect variations in the forex rate, fuel price, and inflation rates. IPPs are also exempted from certain taxes, including corporate income tax, for a period of 15 years, starting from the commercial operation date of the project, and tax on royalties, technical know-how, and technical assistance fees. There is currently an intense debate taking place over the energy future of Bangladesh and its ramifications for social, ecological, and environmental spheres of life, both locally and for the global commons. Bangladesh is committed to provide electricity for all by 2021, to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 5% from power and other sectors by 2030, and to develop 100% domestic renewable energy as rapidly as possible. In order to sustain the economic growth being experienced by the country, government should take prudent measures to ensure energy security that is sustainable. Although the government has taken measures to fill in the demand-supply gap of electricity by setting up small rental power plants, mostly on petroleum products, a continuous supply of HFO and HSD is at the cost of more unbalanced foreign exchange accounts. The government also has to shift its focus from a gas-reliant power sector and take measures and focus on renewable energy. Despite significant pipeline of solar projects indicated by BPDB to come online in the short term, it is unlikely that these projects will materialize due to land acquisition issues and costs of supply, lack of government support, and significant subsidy to gas makes renewable less attractive to investors. I will conclude my speech with the hope that today's discussion would focus on the policy level changes that the government can bring in order to encourage Bangladesh for a more sustainable energy for the future.